Jesus warned me, September will mark the beginning of the end. Beloved, hear me with the ears of the Spirit, for I did not come with tales of men, but with a warning that shook my soul. In the stillness of prayer I heard the voice of Jesus say, September will mark the beginning of the end. Not the end as the world fears it, with chaos and ruin, but the end of an age, the end of illusions, the end of all that has kept you bound. This is not a message to terrify, but to awaken, for what is crumbling is only what cannot stand in the presence of truth. September is not just a month on the calendar, it is a door, and once opened, you cannot return to the former ways of sleep. Prepare your spirit, for the signs will come outwardly, but the real shaking is within you, where heaven has chosen to make its dwelling. The inner warning before the outer sign, every great movement of God begins first within the secret chambers of the soul before it is ever seen upon the stage of the world. When Jesus warned that September will mark the beginning of the end, I understood at once that his words were not first about the shaking of nations, but about the trembling of the heart, the silent yet undeniable stirrings of the Spirit. The end begins not when kingdoms fall, but when illusions collapse within you. Long before wars are waged or storms break forth upon the earth, there is a battle waged in the unseen depths of your own being. The warning is not a trumpet blast in the streets, but a whisper in the secret place, the still small voice that unsettles you, awakens you, and calls you to readiness. The inner warning always comes before the outer sign. Think for a moment, how often have you felt that stirring within, that sense that something is shifting, long before the world confirmed it? You may not have had the language for it, but your spirit knew. This is how the divine speaks, not with chaos, but with conviction. Jesus was not telling me to prepare my eyes for the spectacle of outward events. He was urging me to prepare my heart for the unveiling of the inner kingdom. For September is not only a time upon the earth, it is a season of consciousness, a signal that the old way of seeing, believing, and living must end. What appears to men as an external crisis is, to the awakened, the manifestation of an inner prophecy fulfilled. The truth is this: the outer world is but a reflection of the inner world. What nations call the end is but the projection of what humanity has carried within itself. The storms outside mirror the unrest inside. The collapse of systems mirrors the collapse of old belief structures. The groaning of creation mirrors the groaning of the soul, yearning for redemption. The Spirit warns you first in the silence, that you may not be taken by surprise when the world begins to echo it in signs and wonders. If you are attentive to the inward voice, you will not tremble when the outward voice thunders, for the outward is only the shadow, the real movement is inward, unseen, and eternal. Many will look to September with fear, imagining the terror of endings. But the end is not destruction, it is transformation. When the inner man hears the call, he knows that the end is simply the completion of one cycle so that another may begin. Just as the seed must fall into the ground and die before it springs forth into life, so too must the false identities, the fragile illusions, and the weary systems of thought dissolve so that truth may rise in power. The Spirit warns you not to frighten you, but to prepare you. If you have ears to hear, you will not dread September, but welcome it as the sign that the inner birth has come. Notice how Jesus always spoke of watchfulness. Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. To watch is not to stand upon the rooftops scanning the skies for fire. To watch is to observe the movements within. The true watchman is not stationed upon the city walls, but upon the walls of his own mind. Watchfulness is the discipline of awareness, the sacred attentiveness to the voice within. The inner warning says, awake, for the hour has come. And when you awaken, you see differently, you interpret differently. While the masses tremble at the headlines of men, you perceive the headlines of heaven. You understand that what seems to be an ending is but the beginning of the unveiling of Christ in you. Do not despise the inner warning, for it is the mercy of God that he speaks to you within before he confirms it without. He gives you time to prepare, time to align, time to let go of the things you cannot carry into the new season. Consider how he spoke to Noah before the rain fell. Noah's warning did not come from clouds, but from within the secret voice of God. The outer sign, the flood, came after, but the ark was built because the man obeyed the inner word. In the same way, your September will not destroy you if you have built the ark of faith within. The storms may rage, the systems may shake, but the one who has heard and heeded the inward call will find himself carried above the waters, safe within the covenant of God. Understand, then, that what you feel stirring within you right now is not confusion, it is prophecy. The unease in your spirit is not fear, it is preparation. The longing for something new, the sense that the old cannot remain, the urgency to surrender all of this, is the inner trumpet sounding before the outer trumpet echoes across the earth. To ignore it is to stumble in the dark. To embrace it is to walk in the light before the dawn breaks. When Jesus said, "September will mark the beginning of the end," he was not commanding you to watch the world in panic. He was calling you to watch yourself in faith. The end he speaks of is the end of blindness, the end of delay, the end of separation between you and the kingdom within you. September is a season of unveiling. It is the removal of the veil that has covered your eyes so that you may behold the glory of God not as a promise afar off, but as a reality present within you. The warning is an invitation to let the inner work be done before the outer shaking comes. And so I urge you, be still and listen. Do not dismiss the subtle whispers of the Spirit in your dreams, in your prayers, in your quiet moments. These whispers are the foundations of the new world God is building within you. The world outside may proclaim the end, but you will know the truth. It is the end of shadows, the end of bondage, the end of lies, and with every ending comes a greater beginning. Therefore rejoice. Do not be dismayed when the earth groans. Do not despair when September arrives with its signs, for the true sign is already within you, the kingdom awakening, the Christ rising, the Spirit stirring. This is the warning, and this is the promise. The inner always precedes the outer. And if you are awake within, you shall stand unshaken without. The collapse of the old self, the warning that September marks the beginning of the end, is not a threat of doom, but a divine announcement that what you once clung to is about to be stripped away, not because God desires your pain, but because he desires your transformation. The old self, the false identity, the collection of fears, doubts, and illusions you have carried for years, must collapse so that the new creation can be born. Every shaking you see in the world and every trembling you feel within your soul is not the destruction of your life, but the breaking of the shell that has confined you. The Spirit speaks, "Behold, I make all things new." Yet for the new to rise, the old must fall, and so the collapse is not punishment but liberation. Imagine a house built on sand. It looks firm for a time, but when the storm comes, it cannot endure. That house represents the self you constructed from the opinions of others, the wounds of the past, the lies you believed about yourself, and the fears that kept you bound. September is the storm, not to harm you, but to reveal that what is built on sand cannot remain. In its fall, the opportunity is given to build again, but this time upon the rock of truth. The collapse of the old self often feels like death, and in a sense it is. It is the death of an identity that was never truly you. It is the end of the voice in your head that whispers you are unworthy, unloved, unseen. It is the end of striving for approval in a world that cannot give what your soul longs for. It is the end of leaning on the external to define your worth, for heaven is calling you inward where Christ dwells. Yet the process is painful, for the self resists its own undoing. The ego clings to its survival, and when God begins to peel back the layers, you may feel as though everything is being taken from you. Relationships shift, careers tremble, finances falter, old habits no longer satisfy, and the mind cries out, "I am losing everything." But listen closely, you are not losing your life, you are losing your chains. What you call loss is heaven's surgery, cutting away what poisons your soul. What you call the end is actually the beginning, but the doorway to life is through surrender. September, then, becomes a holy season, for it signifies the divine timing of this inner work. It marks the point where what has been tolerated will no longer be sustained. The mask you have worn grows too heavy, the roles you have played feel empty, and the spirit within you demands authenticity. You will no longer be able to live as a shadow of yourself, for the light is pressing through, and the shadow must vanish. Do not resist this collapse, for resistance only deepens the pain. Instead, embrace it, even when tears fall and confusion surrounds you. Say within your heart, "Not my will but yours," and watch as what you thought was the end becomes the very womb of rebirth. There is a mystery here, for the collapse of the old self is not merely personal but collective. As the individual awakens, so too does the world shake. The turmoil you see in nations, in systems, in economies, in governments, is the mirror of the inner collapse happening within humanity itself. The structures of oppression, greed, and deception are falling, for they too were built on sand. The Spirit of Christ comes not only to renew the individual, but to birth a new age, and just as in you the false must die, so in the world the false must crumble. Do not fear when you see shaking in the world, for it only confirms what is happening in the soul of man. Every end is a beginning, and every death carries within it the seed of resurrection. Think of the seed that falls to the ground. It must die before new life can spring forth. September whispers this truth. You are entering the season where the seed of your old identity is being buried, not to be lost, but to break open and release the life hidden within. The burial feels dark, the soil feels heavy, but beneath the surface, something greater is stirring. The Spirit hovers over you, unseen but present, and the very pressure you feel is the evidence that transformation is near. The collapse is the mercy of God, for if the old self remained, you would never taste the fullness of who you truly are. You were not created to live in fear, bound by the opinions of men, enslaved to your past, or limited by the illusions of this world. You were created to reveal the image of Christ, and that image is rising within you as the false layers fall away. The more the old self collapses, the more you awaken to the truth that you have always been loved, always been chosen, always been enough. This awakening is not a future event, it begins now. Each thought you release, each lie you refuse, each chain you break is the evidence that the collapse is doing its work. You are not called to mourn what is leaving, but to rejoice in what is coming. And yet rejoice not outwardly first, but inwardly, for the kingdom of God is within you, and when the inner kingdom rises, the outer will follow. September, then, is not just the beginning of the end, but the beginning of the unveiling. The unveiling of your true self, the unveiling of divine identity, the unveiling of the Christ, consciousness that has been hidden beneath the rubble of the old. This unveiling will not happen overnight, but the process begins, and once it begins, it cannot be stopped. You are stepping into a new dimension of being where fear no longer governs you, where doubt no longer paralyzes you, where the past no longer defines you. But to step in, the old must step out. Let the collapse come, and let it come with grace. Do not cling to what cannot remain. Do not try to save the fragments of a house destined to fall. Instead, lift your gaze to the new foundation being laid within you. That foundation is Christ, and it cannot be shaken. On this rock you will stand, and when the storms of life come, you will not fall, for your life will no longer be built on the illusions of the old self, but on the eternal truth of God within. The collapse is therefore not the end of you, but the end of who you are not. It is the closing of the chapter where you lived beneath your true stature, and the opening of the chapter where you rise in the fullness of your divine inheritance. September is holy ground. Walk carefully, listen deeply, and surrender fully, for the end you fear is the birth you prayed for. And when the dust of collapse settles, you will not recognize yourself, for you will see with new eyes, speak with new authority, and live with new power. You will say, "I was blind, but now I see. I was bound, but now I am free. I was lost, but now I am found." That is the promise hidden in the collapse of the old self, and that is the meaning of the warning that September marks the beginning of the end. Not the end of life, but the end of lies, and in that end the true life begins.